June 10, 1940. Winston Churchill sat at his desk in 10 Downing Street, papers scattered, the hum of London's wartime city outside. News had just arrived. Benito Mussolini had declared war on the British Empire. Churchill's eyes, usually steely and unreadable, betrayed a flicker of disbelief. Italy, he thought, had waited too long. And yet, now they were throwing themselves into the fight. For weeks, Churchill had watched Mussolini maneuver in Europe, sending troops across Libya, aligning with Hitler, but always cautiously. Now, the Italian dictator had committed fully, declaring war without warning. Churchill understood what it meant. A new front, more pressure on the Mediterranean, more danger for British forces already stretched thin, but he stood by the window, looking out at the Thames, the river reflecting smoke from ongoing air raids in other parts of Europe. The Blitz had tested Britain's courage, but this was different. Mussolini's declaration could spread Axis influence into the Mediterranean, threaten Egypt, and endanger vital supply lines to British colonies. Churchill's mind raced, as it always did. Every move, every decision, every dispatch mattered. He called his generals, laid out intelligence reports, and reviewed maps. Malta, Gibraltar, Suez, every strategic point now hung in the balance. But beyond logistics, there was emotion. Churchill knew the propaganda value. Mussolini's bravado could intimidate the unprepared, but he also knew the Italian army's weaknesses. "Gentlemen," he said, pacing in the small office, "Italy has declared war. Let them come. They will find Britain is not so easily shaken." His voice carried conviction, but it was more than bravado. It was the weight of leadership, of carrying a nation through darkness, guiding it when the storm of fascism and aggression threatened to engulf it. British intelligence had already noted Italy's deficiencies: outdated equipment, slow troop movements, poor coordination. Churchill, ever analytical, saw opportunity in weakness. The Mediterranean, he mused, could be turned into a trap. Mussolini's forces, overconfident and untested in large-scale operations, could be contained. And yet, containment required precise planning, rapid strikes, and a readiness to exploit every error. Churchill summoned his staff, his aides, military commanders. "We will not be intimidated by declarations. Italy has chosen its path, and we will show them the cost of miscalculation." There was a calm urgency in his voice, a mixture of intellect and emotion that had always defined his leadership. He would not underestimate Mussolini, but neither would he panic. Across Europe, Mussolini celebrated his alliance with Hitler. Rome echoed with the promise of conquest, banners waving, speeches praising the Axis unity. But London, quiet and steadfast, was already calculating the counter. Churchill understood that war was not only fought with soldiers, but with strategy, timing, and patience. That in the coming weeks, British forces would strike, intercept Italian supply lines, and push back the inexperienced Italian armies in Libya and the Mediterranean. Churchill's vision was clear: the Axis powers might expand, but Britain's resolve was unbreakable. And Mussolini's declaration? It would prove, in time, that courage without discipline is no match for preparation, strategy, and determination. That he wrote to King George VI, detailing the implications, emphasizing that Italy's entry into the war could force rapid deployments across North Africa. But even as he planned, Churchill allowed himself a private reflection. History often judged bold declarations harshly, and Mussolini had just made one of the boldest mistakes of his life. Every telegram, every map, every decision that day carried the weight of thousands of soldiers, civilians, and the future of the empire. Churchill knew that Italy's war was both a challenge and an opportunity, a test of British strength and an opening to demonstrate mastery and strategy. As night fell over London, Churchill looked at the city lights, thinking of the men at sea, in Malta, in Egypt, readying defenses. Mussolini's declaration was no mere headline. It was a call to action. And Churchill, always the strategist, was ready to answer. The British Empire, stretched across continents, could not be intimidated by Mussolini's rhetoric or his army's bluster. Churchill, understanding the stakes, began drafting orders, coordinating naval operations, and ensuring that every available resource was positioned to respond swiftly. Yet he also understood the psychological battle. Mussolini wanted Britain to fear him. Churchill would turn that fear on its head. Every Italian misstep would be exploited, every weakness magnified. The Mediterranean would become a proving ground, and Britain would show that courage and planning outweighed overconfidence and pomp. Churchill addressed his cabinet. This is not the time to falter. Italy has declared war, yes, but we have the advantage of preparation, discipline, and the knowledge of their weaknesses. We will respond, and the empire will endure. Let them come. Meanwhile, across the Mediterranean, Italian troops mobilized, unaware of the strategic precision they faced. Ships, tanks, and men were dispatched under Mussolini's orders, confident yet untested. London, calm and measured, was already plotting the counter, ready to turn the Italian declaration into a strategic blunder. Churchill's notes, maps, and correspondence from that day reveal a man balancing emotion and intellect, the pride of a nation, the pressure of leadership, and the thrill of opportunity. He understood the risks, but he also saw Italy's weaknesses as a chance to secure the empire's positions and deliver decisive blows in North Africa and the Mediterranean. By the evening, British naval intelligence had begun routing ships to intercept Italian convoys. Air reconnaissance flew over Libya and Sicily. Churchill, observing each report, smiled slightly. Mussolini had declared war, but the war had only just begun, and the first advantage, Churchill knew, belonged to Britain. He returned to his desk, drafting speeches for the nation. Words would matter as much as weapons. Public morale, unity, and the message that Britain would endure and fight back were essential. Mussolini had made his declaration, but Churchill was ready to demonstrate that power without discipline was vulnerability. By midnight, Churchill finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. Italy's war was now official, but Britain was prepared. Strategy, planning, intelligence, and determination would dictate outcomes, not Mussolini's bravado. And Churchill, ever watchful, knew that the coming weeks in the Mediterranean would test the Axis and prove the empire's resilience. Maps, dispatches, troop movements, and naval positions sprawled across tables in London. Churchill's voice, calm yet commanding, instructed generals and admirals. Every Italian maneuver must be tracked, anticipated, and countered. Mussolini's declaration was an alarm bell, but one that Britain was ready to answer with precision. As the city of London slept under blackout curtains, Churchill continued to plan. Italy had chosen war, but Britain would meet it with strategy, discipline, and resolve. Mussolini had made a declaration. Churchill's response would be decisive, measured, and ruthless when necessary. The stage was set. The Mediterranean theater was about to erupt. Mussolini had struck the first note, but Britain, guided by Churchill, would respond with calculated force, demonstrating that declarations without capability could be fatal. Morning broke over London. Churchill convened his military chiefs. Maps covered every table, dotted with troop positions, naval routes, and air patrols. Italy has made its move, he said, but we will turn this into their miscalculation. Every supply line, every landing point, monitored, anticipated, and countered. British forces in the Mediterranean were ordered to reinforce key positions. Malta, strategically vital, became the heart of intelligence and naval coordination. Churchill understood that holding Malta would prevent Italy from controlling supply routes to North Africa and the Suez Canal. Meanwhile, Italian convoys prepared to cross the Mediterranean, confident in their numbers. But Churchill had prepared ambushes using intelligence, aircraft reconnaissance, and naval power. Italian pride and Mussolini's propaganda would soon meet the harsh reality of British planning. Across the cabinet room, Churchill's aides worked furiously, drafting orders, planning contingencies, calculating losses. The Prime Minister remained calm, yet his eyes flicked constantly across maps. Every scenario, every potential Italian maneuver, was evaluated with precision. In Rome, Mussolini celebrated publicly. Speeches, parades, and proclamations filled the airwaves. Yet behind the grandeur, Italian generals worried. Logistics were weak, training incomplete, supplies insufficient. Mussolini's gamble was audacious, but the foundation was shaky. Churchill studied reports from North Africa. Italian forces had mobilized but were slow, poorly coordinated, and ill-prepared for rapid British counterattacks. The desert would test their endurance, and Churchill knew the Axis overconfidence could be exploited. "Gentlemen," he said to his generals, "we will strike when they are exposed. We will show that declarations without preparation can only lead to failure. Italy has entered the war, but the Mediterranean is ours to defend and to dominate strategically." British air forces launched reconnaissance missions, spotting Italian troop movements, ports, and supply chains. Each photograph, each report, fed into Churchill's meticulous planning. He understood that timing and intelligence were as lethal as tanks and artillery. The Mediterranean became a chessboard. Italian battleships, destroyers, and transports moved under Mussolini's orders, while British forces shadowed, ready to intercept. Churchill's strategy relied on precision, patience, and exploiting the enemy's weaknesses. By mid-July 1940, British naval and air forces were already striking Italian supply convoys. Churchill monitored results in real time, celebrating successes quietly, but keeping his focus on long-term strategy. Every ship sunk, every convoy delayed weakened Mussolini's position in North Africa. In London, Churchill addressed Parliament, balancing caution with morale. He praised the bravery of British forces while revealing nothing of intelligence gains. Words were weapons, speeches a shield. Mussolini had declared war, but the British Empire had already prepared the response. Across North Africa, Italian troops continued their advance into Libya, unaware of British surveillance. Sand, sun, and heat added to their challenges. Supplies were limited, morale fluctuating, and leadership uneven. Churchill had predicted this. He knew Italy's declaration of war would soon meet harsh realities. Churchill instructed British commanders to launch small, targeted attacks on Italian forward positions, harass, delay, and demoralize. Psychological pressure was as important as battlefield victories. Mussolini's army might be large on paper, but in action, it was vulnerable. Naval forces patrolled the Mediterranean, intercepting convoys. Air reconnaissance mapped troop positions. British intelligence intercepted messages, revealing Mussolini's desperation to maintain momentum. Churchill read each report with a calm but calculating mind. "The Duce believes in spectacle," Churchill remarked to his aides. "We will show him reality." Every Italian misstep, every gap in their supply lines, would be turned into strategic advantage. Churchill's words were both reassurance to his team and a message to the enemy. Britain was ready, Mussolini, still celebrating initial deployments, remained unaware of how closely British intelligence tracked every movement. Churchill had already anticipated the weaknesses that would cost the Italian army dearly in the coming months. As July turned to August, British air and naval forces struck decisively at Italian supply routes. Convoys destroyed, communications disrupted, morale shaken. The Mediterranean was no longer a neutral space. It had become a proving ground for British strategic mastery. Churchill continued to coordinate from London, issuing orders, evaluating reports, and adapting to every development. Mussolini had declared war boldly, but boldness alone could not overcome preparation, strategy, and discipline. Italian forces, spread thin across North Africa, began to falter under sustained pressure. Leadership issues, insufficient supplies, and British tactical strikes created confusion and panic. Churchill's prediction was unfolding exactly as he anticipated. Back in London, Churchill's speeches aimed to reassure the public. Britain stood strong. Italy's declaration of war, he emphasized, had not shaken the empire. The Mediterranean and North Africa would be defended, and Britain would strike where the enemy was weakest.